All right, well, why don't we get to our commentaries? I guess I'll start today and discuss the roller coaster of emotions that I've personally been feeling when it comes to Donald Trump and the prospect of him getting reelected. So, as things stand today, it's not looking so good for Donald Trump's reelection. And of course, as someone who finds Donald Trump to be a threat to our Constitution, our democratic process, to the health and safety of so many Americans, I think that it's great news. It's something that I want to celebrate. And I certainly did celebrate when I saw that he is lagging behind significantly in polling. Now, this is the latest poll, but I want to note that several polls in a row have indicated that Biden is leading Donald Trump nationally in the double digits. But one of the more recent polls was done by the New York Times and Siena College, and they found that Trump is actually trailing Biden by 14 points. Things also look pretty bad when you look at 6 battleground states that Trump actually won in 2016. So let me give you some of those numbers. The poll found that Biden is ahead of Trump 47 to 36 in Michigan, 49 to 38 in Wisconsin, 50 to 40 in Pennsylvania, 47 to 41 in Florida, 48 to 41 in Arizona, and 49 to 40 in North Carolina. Now, I have always been and always will be skeptical of polling because there are always going to be errors. You have to look into the margin of error, of course. What was the methodology done or used in this polling? And we all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win based on polling back in 2016. And obviously, things didn't turn out the way that we expected. But what we saw during Trump's Tulsa rally gave us a peek into how valid these polls really are, because his Tulsa rally was a complete and utter disaster. So let's take a quick look at the video that definitely led to more celebrations internally. Take a look. So, of course, many people started dunking on Trump. They were expecting millions of people to show up. Brad Parscale demonstrated just how incompetent he is as a campaign manager. There were stories about TikTok users trolling the Trump campaign by reserving tickets and then not showing up. And look, when you see the lack of enthusiasm among some members of Trump's base, it makes you feel a little better. It makes you feel like, hey, maybe it's time to get real cocky and think that Biden's got it in a bag. Yeah, he's hiding out in a basement somewhere, but that's okay, right? Now, I knew that eventually there would be someone on the left who would rain on our parade and publish something that would be sobering and honest and truthful. And of course, I found that piece in the Jacobin, written by Luke Savage. And I want to give you a few excerpts from what he wrote, because I actually do agree with him, even though it's kind of hard to stomach the reality of what we're dealing with right now. I think it's important to be prepared and not get overconfident. So his piece is titled, "Don't Get Too Cocky About Donald Trump's Flop in Tulsa Last Weekend." And in it, he writes, "The chosen Democratic strategy, coupled with the inevitable uncertainty of the coming months, make it uncomfortably easy to envision a scenario where the election's outcome suddenly looks like less of a foregone conclusion. This is admittedly in part an intuitive supposition born of the debacle of 2016, when virtually all the so-called experts told us Hillary Clinton would easily romp to victory. Now, in choosing, and this is the part that I think is really important, in choosing to nominate Joe Biden, the Democrats have gone all in on what may prove a deceptively risky exercise in electoral roulette, opting for a candidate at his best when neither seen nor heard. Biden inspires little in the way of grassroots excitement and is unlikely to marshal a national army of volunteers to his cause. Trump's rally in Tulsa, disastrous though it was, still had better attendance than any Biden rally over the past year." Now, in various conversations that I've had with Michael Brooks on this show, there is some confidence that Biden will beat Trump. But I think that it goes beyond policy or popularity or polling or what the majority of voters want. I think there's a very real issue that's being ignored by the Democratic Party, and that plays a role in how the outcome will turn out in November. And what I'm specifically talking about is the persistent and unstoppable efforts by Republicans and the Trump administration to disenfranchise voters. This has been a campaign that has been ongoing, and there has not been a good response to it. And I think what we experienced during the primary elections in Kentucky and New York is a great example of that. We just had those primaries, and there were all sorts of issues with physical in-person polling places being shut down. 95% of polling places in Kentucky were shut down. There were problems with mail-in ballots. People who had applied for mail-in ballots did not receive them, or they received the wrong ballots, missing portions of the ballots, all sorts of problems. And so we have to consider that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. People are not going to feel comfortable going to in-person voting locations to cast their ballots. So what are we doing to prepare? Luckily, states want to expand mail-in voting, but again, as we can see in recent examples, we're still not prepared. And at the same time, we're dealing with someone like Donald Trump, with an attorney general like William Barr, who have engaged in a full-blown assault against mail-in voting. All sorts of disinformation, all sorts of lies, all sorts of conspiracy theories about how mail-in voting will allegedly lead to fraud, but there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that that's actually true. So I want to start off with a video of Donald Trump, because he's a moron, so sometimes he says the quiet parts out loud, especially when he's talking to his friends at Fox and Friends. And he admitted that in one of the stimulus bills, Democrats were attempting to pass protections for voters to ensure that even in the middle of a pandemic, everyone who wants to vote has the ability to vote. But Trump doesn't want that because he sees that as a threat. He explains why in this next clip.
I will tell you this. If you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy. And
so he said it. I mean, he's very transparent about how he does not want mail-in voting. He does not want to make it easier for Americans to cast their ballots, because if it is easier, if voters are not suppressed, then it's likely that many Republicans will lose. It's likely that he won't get reelected. He repeated a similar point recently during an interview with Politico where he said, quote, "My biggest risk is that we don't win lawsuits against mail-in voting. We have many lawsuits going all over, and if we don't win those lawsuits, I think it puts the election at risk." And by the way, just this week, Attorney General William Barr tried to cite the mismanagement of stimulus checks by the IRS as a way of arguing that mail-in voting would be a disaster, when the two are completely separate. The two are done in a completely different way. The checks are dispersed by the federal government through the IRS, through the Treasury Department. And when it comes to mail-in voting, that's dealt with on a state level. But it doesn't matter because the misinformation continues. And apparently when asked during an interview with NPR if he thought an election conducted mainly by mail could be secure, Barr said, "Personally, no. We just mailed out checks under this program." It wasn't this program. It was through a different program, but okay. "We just mailed out checks under this program, and what is it? I heard something like 20% or something were misdirected," Barr said, referring to a Government Accountability Office report released Thursday that stated more than $1 billion in stimulus funding was sent to people who are deceased. Now, again, the way that the stimulus legislation was written essentially did not allow the IRS to do any type of checking, like any type of, check to ensure that they're not sending these checks to the wrong people or to people who have died. But again, mail-in ballots would be dealt with on a state level. So to Conflate the two is dishonest to say the least, and it's obviously done intentionally to make people think that mail-in voting will lead to widespread fraud, when again, there's absolutely no evidence to suggest this is the case. Now, while all this misinformation is out there, while the Trump administration is pursuing these lawsuits against mail-in ballots, what is the Democratic Party doing? What is Biden doing? So, okay, I get it. Donald Trump is a disaster, and hiding out in a basement will help you look good because Trump looks so bad. But it doesn't matter if people who want to vote for Biden don't have the opportunity to vote for Biden. And by the way, when it comes to absentee ballots, we already have issues, especially when it comes to the number of people who apply for the ballots versus the number of people who actually turn those ballots in. So let's look at New York as an example. And our wonderful producer, Cale Brooks, brought this to my attention. So in the Bronx, for instance, there were over 99,000 absentee ballots issued. Only 15,000 of them were returned. Brooklyn was particularly bad with, 231,697 ballots issued, but only 8,888 were returned. So we need to not only protect mail-in voting and make that a very real option for people who want to stay home and not go to in-person places to vote, but we also have to encourage people to vote, to turn in those ballots so we can get Donald Trump out of office. Everything else really means nothing unless we can ensure that we protect the validity and the ability for people to go out there and vote. And one final thing that I want to bring up, Maggie Haberman, who is a New York Times reporter, is as pro-establishment as you can get. And she shared, I think, very mild analysis on the Biden campaign during a recent interview. And the establishment lost their mind over it. And that is not a good sign. So let me show you the video, and then I'll explain why this is not a good sign.
I don't know any Democrats, honestly, Anderson, who think this is going to be an easy election. I think David can possibly speak to that more than I can, but I certainly don't know any who think this is going to be easy, in part because a lot of people are very scarred by thinking that 2016 was going to be easy. And by people, I mean Democrats were scarred by thinking that Hillary Clinton was naturally going to defeat Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton thought that, her top advisors all thought that, and they were sort of appalled and couldn't allow for the fact that he was doing as well as he was, and reality overtook them. And so I think that there are Democrats who are concerned that that is what will happen again. Look, as much trouble as Donald Trump is in politically right now, a lot of it of his own making, but certainly not all of it. Joe Biden is still a very flawed candidate. He is running a flawed campaign so far. There are still 4 months left. They have to have what are supposed to be 3 general election debates.
So there was a ridiculous meltdown on Twitter to the point where Maggie Haberman's name was trending. And I was like, ooh, she's trending. Are people finally waking up to her shoddy reporting? But no, they were actually mad at her because she spoke the truth in that segment and cautioned the Democratic Party about, possibly being overly confident about Biden's chances of beating Donald Trump. I think that she's right. And I think that the response from the establishment, from the Neera Tandons of the world, is not a good sign, because it's the same type of mentality they had in 2016, which unfortunately led to all sorts of mistakes by Hillary Clinton's campaign and led to someone like Donald Trump winning. So I just want people to wake up and realize that this is not going to be a cakewalk, because while Biden, yes, has his own policy flaws from the past, there's also a huge question that continues to go unanswered about what the Democratic Party is going to do to protect people's right to vote during this pandemic. Michael.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and Luke is obviously a great political analyst, and you could listen to him. He's called Michael and Us podcast, which is actually great, in addition to his writing for Jacobin. And forgive me if I got the name of that show wrong. I don't think, on the level of things like enthusiasm, I think the left needs to, I don't think that matters as much as we would like it to matter. And I think that overwhelmingly, a lot of Democratic voters clearly were just going in with whatever mix of, I don't care who it is, as long as it's not Trump. I think some nostalgia, which I wish there wasn't, but there obviously is for the Obama era. And so I don't know, like when I look at that New York Times poll, what I found fascinating was like Biden's favorable, unfavorable was like 26 and 27. It's not great at all. But Trump's was like 27-52 or 27-50, as in 27 favorable, over 50% unfavorable. So I think that, you know, and I also think in terms of 2016, I mean, yes, Clinton definitely led in the polls. I don't think she led by these margins. And I also think that, you know, there just was, Trump was just doing something new. And it's interesting to see how he's not like, as I always said, of course, he's going to double down on the racism and the xenophobia and the crazy right-wing talking points, but he is barely even pretending to go back to the stuff about trade agreements or suggesting he's a different kind of Republican on healthcare or, you know, sort of like hitting the elite economic structure in kind of like vague, entertaining populist terms. So I honestly think he's in really significant trouble. Republicans always suppress the vote. Obviously, that's another thing that people should contextualize as way beyond Trump. Bill Barr is definitely the most dangerous and actual authoritarian member of the administration, is an incredibly pernicious influence on American life, going back to Iran-Contra. I mean, I just keep having to mention that. So I think, you know, and then, yeah, I mean, but I think that this really disturbing thing about the Haberman thing is that the mainstream resistance Democratic Party, whatever you want to call it, has gotten so touchy and so insulated that they can't even, I mean, this is mild as hell criticism while your candidate looks to be extremely well positioned. So it really is showing. And I think, you know, again, it requires, like, some people are not going to like me saying this, but it's like, of course, Trump and MAGA is like the most extreme political cult in the United States, but there's a resistance political cult. And, you know, there's some definite cult-like tendencies on the left, unfortunately, as well. Like there is at times like a real strong inability to just like, that's just a balls and strikes comment. There's nothing like, you know, she didn't say like, because he's an asshole or because he's whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that was the thing with Bernie. Like Bernie was smeared and lied about all the time. But if somebody said he's over 70 and grouchy, I can't have a meltdown about that. That's true. Like there's some, like, you know, I mean, the one part is partially true. One part's objectively true. Joe Biden, God, I hope his advisors see that he has flaws as a candidate, because I want him to beat Trump. If they're in such a level of delusion, I mean, like, what are they going to do? It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about. Like the head in the sand strategy that I feel like is taking place right now. And look, this goes beyond politics. This is just, I guess, life advice. People need to be open to constructive feedback and critique. And what we saw in the primaries when Biden's voting record came up or his policy record came up was ridiculous. Like just this rejection of any type of discourse that critiques Biden's past. And he will not improve as a candidate unless he's receptive to that. But, you know, we've seen in several videos, even in the election events he held, if anyone came up to him with even like some mild feedback, he didn't react well to it. And that's not a good sign. He needs to be receptive. He needs to be open.
You know, like maybe he doesn't need to, like, he's doing fine. I mean, like, you're right on the merit. Like, I mean, that's the thing. I guess I'm too cynical. A part of me, and this is partially because, you know, I may be in a very cynical mood right now. I think his success is hysterical on some level. Like all of the kind of like, oh my God, we need to do this and we need to do that and da da da. And he just literally came out a year ago, squinting at the camera. It was just like, things are super bad, Jack. Just ghosted.
No, I mean, we are experiencing like every bad thing you can imagine, right? I mean, there's civil unrest, there's a pandemic, and everyone's like, someone needs to save us. And it's just, yeah, I guess there's like a funny element to it that Biden's the guy, right? Biden's the guy that was like forced on us to be the savior of the moment. And I'm just trying to help him out, you know? I'm just trying to help him out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look,
And more than anything, like it does, like my point isn't like he's flawed and he doesn't stand a chance. No, my point is you're actually right. There is this desire, this nostalgic desire to go back to the Obama years. I think that Trump has bungled everything, and it's become very clear, even to Trump's own supporters. And by the way, it's being reflected in some of these Senate races where now Republican incumbents are like, I think I should probably speak out against Trump now because I'm trailing the Democratic challenger here. But at the same time, all of that stuff means nothing if William Barr and Donald Trump are successful in suppressing the vote. And while they're fighting aggressively to do it, I want to know, what is the Democratic Party doing?
They're trying to figure out.
It's just so bad.
There's something so alpha though about Joe Biden that he's just literally just like, yeah, I mean, everybody keeps complaining, calling me senile, just sitting in the basement winning.
That's true. That's true. That is pretty alpha. I will say that.
Oh my God. I mean, look, not having Bernie as nominee is like a world historical tragedy that I think people who know anything and have any type of like actual commitment either recognize or will recognize if they don't yet for whatever reason. But I mean, I don't know. This was like in my most cynical moments where like Biden, it was just sort of like, he's the second choice because it's funny.
You're too funny. No, sometimes you do need to find like the comedic relief in these kinds of things. And I was actually watching Dave Chappelle's 2017 special.
So good.
I had seen it before, and I'm so glad I watched it again last night. It's so relevant for what we're experiencing right now in this moment in history.
Everybody watch. I mean, the way he has kept up his quality level is mind-blowing. All of his 2017 specials, and then the one he just released a couple weeks ago is
so
good.
Mean,
it's pretty funny, but it's actually like historical and poignant. I mean, he might just be like the best communicator in the United States.
I definitely. I mean, his ability to make you laugh about things that make you cry on a regular basis is incredible. And that's why, look, when I started working at TYT in 2007, the thing that really appealed to me about left-wing ideology was the willingness to embrace freedom of expression and comedy, even when comedy makes you uncomfortable. At that time, it was the right wing that was trying to censor comedy, and everyone thought they were crazy. And the pendulum has swung in the complete opposite direction. That's not to say that comedians time to time don't make mistakes or whatever, but I do think that it is toxic when we create this culture where people are afraid to express themselves. Oh. You know, I don't want to censor the Dave Chappelles of the world.
Oh, please, God, no. I mean, that's just terrible. But I do want to say, and I'll do my commentary after our conversation with Julia, but I did actually, speaking of mistakes, I just made a mistake in the last 5 minutes, and I just want to really clear this up really quickly. Marianne Williamson was the second choice. Joe Biden was in like the top several for comedic purposes, but the queen, the god, the goat, Marianne Williamson was actually like legit my second choice. That was the funniest shit when I would tweet something, because first of all, because it's just like the primary choice is Bernie. Like I never was fucking around. But the other thing was just really like in the beginning, if you tweeted out Marianne's the second choice and they're like, oh my God, I hope you're joking. Have you read Elizabeth Warren's Medium posts?
Oh my God. I know.
It was something so, and then with each step of the way, Maryam just vindicated me again and again and again and again and again. And she's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's
still out there.
It's true. She definitely had some great moments. Her interview with Dave Rubin, was phenomenal. That nothing impressed me more than how she single-handedly dismantled him on camera. I was like, wow, it's awesome.
Someone sent me a Dave Rubin thing that, I mean, maybe we'll play at some point, but honestly, it was just painful. It was, I guess he was taking like a super chat question, which, by the way, we'll take a couple of your super chat questions at the end. And somebody was just like, are you going to go on Joe Rogan's show to promote your new book? By the way, I love when people say in general, I felt for Dave, because sometimes like people will say like, hey, Michael, would you like, first of all, dream guest spot would be to go on the Joe Budden podcast, not Rogan, Joe Budden podcast. Gene would love to be on that show. And I'd love to host him too. But I like when people ask like, would you go on Joe Budden? It's like, yes, I would go on like a massively popular, in this case, like extremely good, like podcast. Yes. Like the thing that is stopping that from happening is not me just being, I don't really feel a need to. So they asked like Dave Rubin, are you going to go on Rogan to promote your new book? And it's like, there's obviously a reason that Dave Rubin has not gone on Rogan to promote his fucking book. And Rubin was just like, I guess, I mean, I don't know. I think we've asked like a bajillion times, just haven't heard back. I'm just like, oh man.
I know. I saw that video. It was so sad. It was so sad. Poor Dave.
I don't think this is funny. I can't take it. I don't know what's the matter with me. Maybe I'm just getting really soft, but I was just like, I don't think this is funny. This is just like a pure dismantling.
So good. By the way, I have a funny, do we have time? Oh no. We have our guest coming up. Okay, so let's do that.
Gossip about Dave Rubin. She's a station.
I'm sure she would love it,
Yeah. Hang out. Yeah.